Hey everybody, final thoughts time for Dark Souls, the card game, which is a very, very interesting game. I want to say I've enjoyed it. There are certainly elements of it that I enjoy immensely. It's actually a really kind of clever mix of almost Dominion style card play, mixed with Magic the Gathering style deck building, mixed with like a classic Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior style video game combat simulation. It's a really odd duck, and I like it a lot. But I want to hear, how does it play with more than two? Because I've only played as a two-player game where I think it's a little weak. So, I am not alone today, everybody. I am joined once again by Seth Locke. Seth, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, it's Seth of Board Games Unlocked. He's a board game YouTube channel, kind of like mine. If I were to be a little bit more salty with my language, and if I were to ever actually finish any of my run-throughs, you might have an idea of what Seth does. And Seth has played the game as well. And Seth, actually, it occurred to me, I didn't ask. You have played this with more than two, right?
Yes, I have.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. Then you can stay. So here's the deal. I think the puzzle of the actual combat of this gameplay is potentially very, very cool. And, I know this is based on a very, very popular modern series of video games, the Dark Souls series, which I've never played, but I guess they're a very grim, dark fantasy setting, and they're all about really putting the screws to the player and just making you grind, destroying you, and making you play over and over and over again and face near impossible odds until you persevere. And I guess that kind of comes across in the game a little bit because you do kind of grind in this game. It is almost kind of a video game-esque feel of, okay, I'm going to go back to that cursed road again and I'm going to fight some more stuff because I just got to keep on leveling up till I can beat the big boss before time runs out. And certainly, man, this is almost a black and white game in terms of its art. There is very little color in this grim, very dark world. But what I enjoy the most is setting up my guys on one side of the fence, the bad guys on the other side, and then just kind of doing this combat dance, moving into position, shucking and jiving. And I can almost imagine, Seth, you're quite a bit younger than me. I don't know if you remember the original Final Fantasies 1 and 2 and 3, or Dragon Warriors, where you say, okay, attack, and they kind of walk up and do their little punch, and then they walk back. It kind of feels like that. It had a really nice nostalgic vibe. My only problem with the actual combat is, as I was starting to say, the puzzle is just not there. It's pretty straightforward. With only two players, and therefore only two characters, and generally not very many bad guys on the other side, there's just not as much opportunity for, oh gosh, if you were in that lane, or if you were standing in front of me, or quick, if you move over here, and because another beautiful thing about the combat is how free-flowing it is. This is not, okay, I'll finish my turn and then you do your turn. Oh, I'll do a little bit of my turn and now you'll do a little bit of your turn, and you can do so much coordination of stuff. That's really, really good. It just doesn't happen as much as I would like. And that's why I'm curious. Seth, you've been very patient. Tell me, what's it like with more players? And just what's your impression in general?
So, it's interesting, because I did not expect you to like this game at all.
Okay.
Which is what's funny to me. But whenever you talk about the puzzle aspect of the actual game, it is kind of there, I think. And especially, a little bit more with more players. Personally, I've actually enjoyed it solo.
Oh, really?
Over any number of players. I've played it with each number. Mm-hmm. And I feel like with the simplicity of the game and the fact that you have, you're pretty much almost stuck in your situation. Because, if you're playing with 4, you have 6 spots total. And you can't really, you can move if there's an empty spot, or you can swap spots, but that takes up both players' movement. Yeah. Which I personally didn't like, because the way... It's so hard, because Dark Souls, they're trying to emulate the video game.
Right.
Which they kind of do. But the video game is obviously, meant for one player.
That's a good point,
and so, whenever you add just more people and still try to make it thematic, it becomes clunky. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, well, we need you in this lane so you can hit this person because you have the cards that are its weakness to bypass its armor. It's like, okay, great. So let's move you there. Oh, wait, but I'm in your spot. And you're diagonal to me. It's like, oh, okay, well, we can't get you there.
See, that's what, again, I should say, that's what I'm imagining the fun factor of this game comes in. Getting, presented with the problem, like, oh, well, crap. I mean, if we could just get you into that position, this would be really great. You'd totally take that guy out. What can we do? What can we sacrifice? How can we use these multi-use cards to make that happen? Are you saying that when you get to higher player counts, it's so tight that, I mean, there are no solutions? Well,
because the way that the damage is dealt, in my opinion, is just like, because there's never really a chance they're going to miss you. I mean, especially
it's all procedural.
They're always going to hit you. It's like, okay, they're going to hit this spot. No one's there. They'll hit that row. It's like, what? Like, it's okay. I guess they just always hit. So it's like, let's say no one's in that row at lower player counts, like at 1 or 2. Then they'll just go up to the next one and then hit the person. It's always the highest threat. So the person who's playing the knight is always getting hosed.
Yeah.
And it's like, So the puzzle aspect really, it's like, okay, how can we maneuver ourselves to be able to deal damage but not take any? There wasn't enough reward for that type of risk.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've looked at it more. The puzzle, I mean, you're correct, because to a certain extent, I mean, it is a war of attrition. They are going to beat you down hard and fast, which, again, I'm assuming is just true to the video game, not having played it myself.
Pretty much.
So the puzzle is less about, how can we protect ourselves, and more about how can we do the maximum amount of damage as fast as possible. Because if we take too long, they will wear us down, and we will not make it to the end because we have to come out of here. We have to finish this little batch of bad guys in a couple of rounds, or else we can't move on. We can't have a chance.
No, that's absolutely true. And what I do really like about this game is, and I know you've played Pathfinder, is they took that same element of your deck is also your life.
Yeah.
So I personally always like that in Pathfinder, and Gloomhaven kind of does that as well. Mm-hmm. But I've always liked that, hey, this is who you are as a person, the deck representing you, and the more you take damage, the more tired you get. So whenever you're doing this, it's like, I guess getting hit doesn't feel as bad, because here's where I get conflicted, did you play the Dark Souls board game?
Which I have not played, no.
Okay, so I backed that on Kickstarter, and it was a huge flop for me.
Oh, wow.
But their mechanic of damage to health, or damage to stamina, in the board game it was one track. So if you took damage, it went down the right side, and if you did stamina, which were your actions and stuff, they went up on the left side, and if they ever met, you died.
Okay.
So you were trying to be conservative, and here I feel like you're like more free flowing, because you have 20, 30, 40 cards in your deck.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just take the damage. So it's a little bit less, or it's a little bit more forgiving.
Okay.
But
yeah.
When it comes to that puzzle aspect, it was like, because the last game I just played was with 2, and I liked it a lot better at 2 than 3 or 4, because you had more maneuverability to be able to get to your spots, and then if you had to swap spots, it wasn't as detrimental. Whenever it's just like, okay, let's just work you and I, versus 4 people where it's just basically we're all just bumping into each other, and it's like, okay, I guess we're not killing anyone.
Yep. Yeah, and that's funny. I mean, that to me, I'm basically on the flip side. I mean, I want more of that. God damn! How do we just get that out of my way? Type stuff.
Right.
And when Jen and I played it, we thought, yeah, okay, this is clever. This is a nice. It flows so smooth, and like you said, it's a very good point. I mean, that core mechanism of my deck is my life meter. That's just so brilliant and simple and elegant. It just works. So we liked all that, and I should also say we haven't talked about it all yet. We also, as former Magic the Gathering players from years ago, we did really like the fact that, okay, when we eventually, we're done fighting, we've gotten as much as we could, let's take our treasure, get back, or depending on how much we want to push our luck. And that's an interesting element too. There's a little bit of push your luck. Do we go for one more encounter, or no, because if there's too much to lose, but man, we don't want to be wasteful. We want to be as efficient as possible. We don't want to go back and rest until we've gotten as much as we could, until our deck is just about empty. But if it gets too empty, we're dead. So that's really cool. But when you eventually do make it back, you don't just say, oh, well, okay, I guess I'll buy a couple cards and put them in and reshuffle and move on out like a regular deck builder. No. You potentially tear your whole deck apart. I mean, you picked up a bunch of new treasures. You might buy some better versions of the cards you already have. And, you might walk out with, 15 or 20 different cards than what you started with. But as you're rebuilding your deck, you are always having to do that kind of Magic the Gathering deck sculpting thing of, right, okay, these are all the actions I want to do, or weapons and stuff in this case, but I've got to make sure I've got all the mana I need to play these. I've got to maintain the right ratio, and how much am I going to mix and match stuff? Instead of mixing and matching red and green and black and white and blue, you're mixing and matching I forget what all the names are, all the different the stat type things for being able to pull out might or whatever. But it's the same end result. And we actually found that to be actually quite entertaining as well. And gosh, I think from our experience as a two-player game, we almost kind of enjoyed it more. Hey, let's go back and now let's spend some time thinking, okay, I'm going to make my deck really strong at this. And okay, you're going to be kind of more of a broad-reaching thing. And I'll really, that kind of stuff was nice too. I didn't expect that at all. I mean, I haven't really had that sense of tearing apart and rebuilding a deck and trying to balance the whole thing with ratios for, 15 years. So it was a real kind of nostalgia trip for me too.
That's true.
What did you guys think of the rest or the rebuild yourself phase?
That's actually a really good point. I did not make that connection to Magic, but that is essentially what it is. Like the stamina is like your mana or your lands. That's a good point.
Exactly.
I personally really liked it because here's the thing, and I'm going to probably make a lot of connections to the board game because they're made by the same company, and I despise the board game.
Wow. Was it the same designer? I haven't actually looked.
It was the same designer and same company that did all of this.
Okay.
And so whenever they made the card game, I was like, oh, great, I guess I'll try it. So whenever you got items in the board game, you had your own character that had their stats, kind of like the video game. Your faith, your strength, your all of that.
Right.
And you had to spend a bunch of souls to level up, and the higher it got, the more the more souls it cost.
Mm-hmm.
So how you got items was essentially the same way as the card game. You just randomly drew them from a deck, but in the board game you had to spend souls to do it.
Mm.
And then so you got them, and they were all random. It was just a huge deck of cards, of item cards. So you spend souls, draw, and be like, oh great, I can't use this. In the card game, what they did is every character has their own personal deck, which I really like, which kind of is your beginner, hey, this is kind of what you should go with this character.
Right.
But they give you the freedom to where you don't have to. Like, that deck constructing, which normally I actually hate, in this one is just so quick, and it doesn't have a lot of like, oh, well, that didn't work, guess, I'm stupid. So, like, whenever you get your souls and you get your items, which you just draw, you can look at them and be like, oh, okay, so I need 1 faith for that. Oh, I don't really have a lot of faith, but I'll take some, some strength out because I have a whole bunch of that and buy some faith so I can make this weapon work. Which kind of, in my opinion, makes it seem more like the video game. Because the video game, you get a bunch of weapons that you can be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just grind for a little bit and then get enough souls to level up and be able to make this weapon work. So I really liked it, and I really like how streamlined and smooth that was. There wasn't any convoluted, okay, well, I need to do all this math to figure out how to level up myself. It's just, oh, okay, that costs 5 and that costs 2. That's it. And they're always going to be better. And my friend, last time, the 2-player game, he would actually break his deck apart. Every time we rested, he'd pull out like every single strength and every single, faith card and stuff like that he had. And then he would like calculate it and be like, oh, I can get rid of these single ones and buy these, double ones.
Right.
And then we would like swap like items and stuff like that. Be like, oh, well, this is more, your style versus mine. And I really liked it. It made you feel more personal, and you got rewarded because your deck also wasn't like 60 cards. It was at max, I think, like 35 maybe. Yeah. And so in my run through, because I did my run through solo.
Okay. Playing 2 characters?
No, just one.
Oh, playing. Oh, okay.
And I got one weapon, and I was like, oh, this would be awesome if I can get this to work. So I put it in, bought a few cards, and it ended up paying off. And it's like, okay, well, I'll never get to use this again, but it helped me in this one time, so that's still awesome.
Cool. So you said you like it best solo. I mean, you played it, all player counts, rate them. Solo is number 1.
So solo, 2 would be number 2. Actually, it goes 3 would be number 3.
Just right there. The tighter the board gets, the less you enjoy it, just because of the hassle of the extra work you have to do to just kill these things.
Correct, because in all reality, that's literally all you're doing. You're just playing cards to be like, I'm going to do this much damage to this guy. There's no, substance or to really anything about the game, which isn't a bad thing. It's just at 4 players that, okay, how are we going to get you all the way over here and swap so we can all be efficient was just too tedious. In
fair
my
enough.
mind.
That's a fair observation. I mean, to me, that's the kind of thing. But me and Jen, we're crazy hardcore Euros fans,
Right.
and I mean, to me, playing with 2 players, there's a bit of that. There's and particularly because again, there's no round structure or turn structure at all. Okay, I'll just play this one card and or I'll only do the swap so that you can get into position, because then once you finish this thing, now that that's out of the way, if somebody else swaps with me, we can go on ahead and hit everything in the back row. All that kind of stuff is what's really attractive to me. But in a 2-player game, it just doesn't happen that much. It is much more straightforward. It is just, right, okay, well, I'll do my cards, you'll do your cards. Maybe there'll be a little bit of back and forth, but we just didn't see it happen that much. And that's why I was assuming it would be necessary at a 4-player game, just because you have to work so much harder. I mean, you're much more powerful, of course, but then the bad guys are more powerful too, and it just becomes a tougher thing to do. But like I said, you just didn't enjoy the additional toughness. You would have preferred, I'm just here to fight. I don't want to have to solve these crazy logistical puzzle type things.
And that's kind of like how I felt about the board game as well. I played with 4 at that, and it was just too ridiculous. You didn't get enough souls to distribute to all the players to make us all level up. So one person was really just high leveled while everyone else was just dying. So whenever it came to the card game, what I did like about that was how quick it was also. Because in the board game, it has a bunch of miniatures, and you jump in and you're like, and the difference between that one and the card game is how you have your locations, and your locations stay the same, but your enemies are different every time you go back.
Right.
The board game, it was not that way. It was always the same enemies, always the same locations, and they always did the same thing.
Right, which is my understanding, that's kind of true to the video game.
It is, but as taking that and moving into board game, it's like, okay, imagine the video game, you rest at the bonfire, it's immediate, and all the enemies are immediately back. Now take that to the board game, and it's like, okay, we're going to go rest, we have to do all of this, and now, I have to set up all the miniatures again, I have to move on. It's just so
the upkeep,
monotonous.
Yeah.
And so I actually played, I did a run-through of the board game on my channel as well, and I did a solo run-through for that, because I felt it was just so much better. I got all the souls to myself, I got all the items to myself, so I got to be this
Seth
awesome...
Block plays well with others.
I never said that. So it's just, I really enjoyed the card game solo, and it takes half the time as well.
Yeah, of course. Man, I wish I'd tried that now. That's really interesting. I mean, I just kind of assumed, there's just going to be even less interesting stuff going on if only one character running around. But yeah, that's really interesting. So overall, are you keeping it?
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's what I want to mention real quick is, what did you guys think of the boss encounters? Because that was the best part of the board game, and they kind of did the same thing here, was the bosses are there, they have their own deck, and then they go through their deck, and if you run out, you flip it, because even in the video game, they have a pattern, and it's learning that pattern to be more efficient in fighting them.
Yes.
Unless they heat up, which some of the bosses do. I fought against every boss that the base game came with.
Oh, sweet. No, so you have more experience than me. I really liked it. I'm trying to remember. I've only made it all the way through with Jen for a full game I cannot remember now, because this was months ago.
Yeah.
So we played most of a game, but we couldn't finish, and then we played a second game all the way through, and we actually did a full-on boss. I want to remember, it was like one where there were 2 of them. Two guys moving around.
The one that he had minions.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And I like the idea of it, that as you were just saying, that they have kind of you have to learn them. It's the same. It's the video game. It's a video game mentality. You have to learn their pattern to know when to strike. What's it? To strike the crab for maximum damage, or the lobster. That video game reference from E3 years ago. I thought they were actually really cool too, and they're kind of the ultimate version of that puzzle.
Right.
Maybe there's a little bit more memory involved with that than I like, because I have to admit, whenever memory stuff comes into a game, Jen and I, we kind of like, look, we're doing enough just to try to figure everything out. We don't have to remember stuff on top of this.
That's
so
fair.
I mean, it's that's a little bit of an issue, but I think on the whole, I really did like it. It's actually, I've never played it, but it's kind of what attracts me to the combat in Kingdom Death Monster as well.
Okay.
In Kingdom Death Monster, you only fight one monster, but they just got that big deck. That deck was kind of randomly generated, and the longer you fight them, the more you learn, well, this is what their strengths are, and this is what their weaknesses. So I do kind of like that in practice.
Yeah, I do too. And for the record, it was the Abyss Watchers that I think you guys fought.
Okay.
But yeah, it's always interesting, and that was always the fun part of the board game and the card game I liked. And especially if you go, because there's like a harder, boss and basically a mid-level boss in the card game as well. And if you beat that one, you'll get souls as well as a really good item, like regardless of what it is. Now, so pretty much to say the same, I love the boss encounters. Here's my answer to your question. I don't know if I will keep it. And the reason, unless they support it. I don't know if they will.
That's a good point.
They supported the board game really well. There's a bunch of expansions about to come out. I mean, I'm not getting any of them. I sold my my copy because I did not like. But with the card game, if they were to be like, hey, we're releasing, all they have to do is just mini expansions. Hey, here's a boss expansion.
Packs. Yeah. Here's another 40 cards. Some new weapons, a new boss. Yeah.
Yep, and if they did that, I would gladly keep it, but I don't know if they will. I don't know how well this card game did, and since I fought all 4 of them, and they were fun, and they were all stressful, it was like, okay, well, I beat them, so...
Yeah, but it's not like you're now going to go back, now let me try them with this other character, because there's only just the 4 characters.
The 4 characters, right.
And I mean, you will get some variation, because of course you're going to get different weapons thrown your way.
Right.
Maybe going to change things up, but you're still doing the same core kind of thing.
Yeah, the same thing, and like, I have Gloomhaven, I have 7th Continent, I have I have all these games that I'm like, I don't want to play Dark Souls right now. I have all these other games that actually will reward me for progressing versus... And it wasn't like the people...
That's a good point. I didn't think about this. There's no campaign in this at all. And we're kind of entering this phase of modern designer board games where campaign play is showing up in all kinds of games.
If your game doesn't have a flushed out world and campaign, it's garbage. It's essentially like the world we're living in.
That's a good point.
And if people want a campaign, then the board game does come with a campaign, but it's really just, hey, fight each monster in succession, pretty much. Which is the video game. But it's like, we need to have a world, like I'm looking at trying to get folklore, and it's like, at this point, it's becoming almost too much, because I do all these series for my channel as well. I'm like, oh dear God.
Campaigns for us are a killer. I mean, regular game, we only have to play a little bit, and we've seen everything, but no, campaign, you gotta finish the campaign.
Right, and with games, even let's throw campaign games out, and just... If your single game, like I'm looking at like Scoville or Coliseum, I'm looking at these games on my shelf right now, it's like if it doesn't have variety, if everyone sees everything on the first playthrough, it's almost a negative.
Or not see everything, but see kind of an example of everything.
Yeah, like for me, whenever I play games, I have friends who will look through the cards beforehand, and I'm like, nah, that ruins it. Like, and so if I see everything in a game, like I've seen everything in Dark Souls, and I'm like, there's no surprise anymore, which is funny because that's what it's like in the video game. Like, there's no real surprise once you beat it, but yet people will go through New Game Plus and stuff. It'd be interesting if they implemented a, difficulty adjustment. Like, hey, you beat it, okay, now add these cards.
Wait a minute, I've totally forgotten. There's no difficulty level setting?
I don't think so. There wasn't in the... I have the game in front of me right now. I think... So... Nope, there is not. There's just different bosses.
That's a huge oversight.
And custom starting decks. That's pretty much your alternate modes to play.
Yeah.
So if they add hey, don't add these cards in until you beat them all again. You beat all 4 bosses, then add them, and this adds it's like a New Game Plus to make it more difficult.
The equivalent of achievements. Now I've got to beat it this way. Yeah. So there's a solid base.
Yep.
And they could definitely build on. It's just a question of whether they will. And I have no idea.
Correct. Yeah, I don't know either. And it's not if I had to give it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it base game after beating all of them probably a 7. Mm-hmm. But it's also it's like a low 7 with the fact that, hey, I really like the game and just support it, give it life. And it'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Did you guys find it to be difficult? because the board game was brutal. It was really hard, and I've played this at every player count, and I didn't feel it was as hard.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, it was challenging, but and I don't know. It's certainly designed to make you feel hopeless. Like, oh my God, how can we possibly make it? But if you just punch through and you make smart choices, I mean, we didn't find it. I mean, as a 2-player game anyway, to be. There was a challenge, but it was like it wasn't like playing on hard level for a pandemic or anything like that.
Right. It's kind of like a faux difficulty almost, because it's like they're always going to hit you, so that you just expect. And it kind of reminds me of, like, almost like that Ghost Stories. You know how Ghost Stories is really only hard because everything's random? It's like, that's kind of how Dark Souls felt to me. It's like, well, it wasn't difficult because of, something happens and I react to it, kind of like Robinson Crusoe. Where it's like, I need to deal with this situation that came up, but I still have a little bit of hope. I still can react. Or Pandemic is a perfect example where it's like, oh yeah, it's easy. Oh my God, it's awful right now. But you can react to it, and it's sometimes, very rarely, it'll get too far out of your hand. But this didn't have any of that. It was just, okay, they hit you. All right, now I hit them, and.
But you would think that, strictly speaking, you're not going to lose. It's more of, it's just how much damage are we going to take before we beat them? Because the more damage we take, the smaller our deck is, which means we have to get back to the bonfire that much quicker. And that's the loop, because they're just trying to emulate that loop of the video game, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I don't know, what did you think of the limited bonfire? And I know they had to make a way for players to actually lose.
Yeah.
Because in a video game, if you die, you just lose your souls, and then you go get them back, and you don't have, like, lives.
Oh, you can just go infinitely, because it's a video game. You just keep going until you eventually do it.
And I also felt I never really liked it in the board game, because the board game, you had a limited number as well, of sparks, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
If you run out of those, you're done. Whether you go and rest or you die. In the card game, I really actually enjoyed it a lot more, because when you rest, you're rewarded. Hey, everyone gets a free stamina, or everyone gets or draw an item. And I was like, yeah, okay. It doesn't feel so, hey, you're penalized for actually doing well and getting a bunch of souls, but you have to go rest. It's like, all right, well, we know we'll get a good item for doing this, but you're still kind of stressed at the same time, because you're like, we're at 3 out of 5, and we haven't beaten a boss yet, or something like that.
That's the thing. I mean, I think it was an appropriate level of stress. So, Seth, sounds good. I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, because I just noticed my laptop battery is about to die. Then our Skype connection will instantly disappear. So before we go, I also just wanted to mention, for folks who've been watching my show for a while, this is not the first time Seth has been here. But Seth, I introduced you as Seth Locke of Board Game Unlocked, not of your previous moniker, Fat Nasty Nerd. And I'm wondering what happened to the Fat Nasty Nerd.
So,
I mean, you were already skinny. So
I took a shower, and I lost a lot of weight. No, what happened is the beginning of that channel name was kind of like, I'll make a YouTube channel, and we'll just see what happens. Well, recently I broke 1,000 subscribers, and it's just continuing to grow. Thank you very much. And that was like a big milestone for me, because it felt like my hard work actually paid off, and being on your channel has helped tremendously, so I thank you very much for allowing me to do this. But as it grew, I was like, okay, this is pretty much a second job at this point, and people send me games, and some people have donated. I'm like, okay, I need to be more professional. If I want people to send me games for Kickstarters or whatever, I can't walk up to them and be like, it got to a point where I was like, hey, check out my YouTube channel. Here's the link. I didn't want to tell them what my name was, because it was like, they're going to, and whether or not, because my content was legitimate, but it's like, if you heard Fat Nasty Nerd Runthrough, you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll definitely check that out. So I worked with all my friends, and we ran through a bunch of different names. I put a video out on my channel asking what people liked. A lot of people like Board Games Unlocked, because in my mind, I have like a little saying of like unlocking the potential for board games.
Yeah.
And I mean, I never say that, but it's like, and it's also play on my last name. So I was like, okay. And so it just became more professional, and if I'm going to keep doing this, the channel name needed to change, and the animations and all that. Content is still the same. Still the no holds barred, all that, but
still viewer discretion advised.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But at least the material and the end of it all, like the run-throughs and the discussions and everything, are still legitimate.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, welcome to the big leagues. Welcome to the party, pal.
Thanks. We got a long ways to go.
Yeah. Well, you're on your way. And I think that's where we're going to end it. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. And thank you very much, Seth, for showing up and filling in the blanks that I couldn't quite get myself. And have a very, very nice day, everybody. Talk to you later. So long. Seth, say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.